Alrighty, boys and girls, the long-awaited 34th episode of the Phyba Performance Podcast is finally back and running. And today we are greeted by the amazing Xavi Donobedian. He is a member of the Phyba team. Whilst the team is still quite small, he is an absolute asset. And I wanted to do a podcast just to intro Xavi, let him give you a bit of a lowdown on what he does, what he's good at, what his previous experiences like, and I think you guys are going to be absolutely amazed with the content that starts coming out in and around our blogs, in and around our socials, our email list, basically just giving you a ton of Xavi's expertise and background. He's also going to be helping out with formulations, going to be helping out with the product suite. And so I'm going to hand it over to Xavi to do a bit of an intro and basically get you guys schooled up on who Xavi is and why we think he's an invaluable part of the team. So, Xavi, how are you?
Thank you for having me. Long awaited for sure, and this is a joy. My background started in health and wellness as a kid. I grew up with a familial history of obesity. It was wild to experience, wild to see. And, throughout that journey, I noticed these patterns in my family as it related to food. It was a coping mechanism. It was a constant source of emotional negation, using it to numb out, to disassociate. The relationship with food was not a holistic one. It was not around nourishment. It was not around self-development. It was a treacherous path to follow, and I followed that for some time. So I remember as a young kid, I was always into sport, really athletic, and really stoked just on physical movement. But over time, after my parents' divorce, I saw it become a coping mechanism for myself as well. And I had these pretty profound moments as a kid. My grandfather in particular standing out. He was morbidly obese, diabetic, sat on the couch all day, 380 pounds, no physical activity. And I thought, this is rough. This is really rough. And I saw what that looked like long term. And I had inklings as I grew up around maybe developing a different approach and trying something that would be more fruitful for me. So I did. When I was 13, I went to fat camp, which is not just something from South Park. It's actually a thing. Like, you can go and spend a month losing weight. And it was one of the most profound experiences of my life. It was incredible. I lost like 35 pounds in a month. It was super restrictive from a dietary perspective. But man, I ran my first mile. I clocked a 6:30 at 13 years old, which I was stoked on.
Wow.
I felt like the man. I was like, whoa, my physical capacity is incredible. If I put my mind and my heart to this, I can really make significant progress. And so I did. I went to that fat camp. I felt like the man, like the jock on campus, if you will. Kept it off for a year. And it was great. I was super, super into fitness, working out all the time, all the while being really restrictive. 1,200 calories, 10 grams of fat a day. It was nearly impossible to maintain. And I did my best. I got into Shaun T and insanity. I lived across from a world gym. I had a personal trainer, all that good jazz. And there came a certain point when I just couldn't keep it up anymore. And the emotional baggage that I had yet to address pushed me back into those coping mechanisms. So while I lost 35 at fat camp, over the course of 4 years in high school, I ended up gaining back 135.
Wow. 60 kilos.
A lot.
For those of you who are listening from Australia, that's 60 kilos.
It's a lot of weight and body fat, not muscle, right?
Yep.
So again, a pivotal point came. I'm 17 years old, raised by a single father, eccentric antique dealer, living in this wild loft in San Francisco, view of the skyline, giraffe heads, posters, chandeliers. He was really my rock, the one source of support I had. And I'm 260 pounds, heavy, just pretty miserable in my body. And right before I went off to college, or uni as you call it here, he had a series of strokes, 3 strokes in 3 weeks. And from what the doctors told him, they said, there's no chance that you are going to survive. And it was this moment of, I'm now leaving to go all the way across the country to Boston. I might not have a father in a couple weeks. And the only thing I'll have is myself. So at that point, I chose to go plant-based and started my journey of health and wellness in earnest. Not to belabor the point, fast forward a couple of years, I'd gone to school in Boston, came back home, and I discovered yoga. I was like, man, this is something that's profound. It can be an applicable practice. I did 500 hours of yoga training, moved to New Mexico, started teaching, got into kettlebells, found a guy named Paul Chek, who was just speaking some serious hot truth as it came to mental emotional development. And I thought, this is my pathway to addressing the root of all of this. So again, from that 260 peak, by the time I got to New Mexico, I was down to 150. So that's 110 pounds I had lost during that time.
Wow.
And I went through his training, integrated movement science, holistic lifestyle coaching, golf biomechanics, studied with some incredible mentors, Paul Chek, Jator Pierre, Chris Kresser, Mike Salemi, and really started my career in health and wellness, in addition to doing some work in functional medicine and retaining my certification as an adapt practitioner, reading blood work, hormone panels, stool assays, so forth and so on. Fast forward to now, I met James a year ago off of a Flora Fuel ad. And I thought, hey, when you see the truth, you know it. And that's when we started this journey together. So that's a bit of my story.
I love it. And one thing that kind of hit me there was that you've got such a, and this is for the audience as well. When I got an email from Xavi saying, hey, essentially, I want to do some work with Phyba, I want to work with you in some way, I thought to myself, we are just a startup business. We have no extra cash sitting in the bank to make this happen. But when I read Xavi's cover letter and resume, I couldn't believe how much stuff you had covered in such a short period of time. It looks like you just went headfirst into finding all the information that could possibly help you along your journey to help other people as well. And you just went headfirst. Has that always been the case? It probably sounds like it after, heading to the camp when you were 13 years old and then revisiting all this stuff, between 17 and 20. Have you always been a head first type of person? Like you see an opportunity and just go for it? And where do you think that came from?
Yeah, great question. I grew up in an environment, both with my parents being entrepreneurs and also, San Francisco, the Bay Area being a startup culture, meaning everybody has a grand, great, new, bright idea and they go for it head first. No fear, no trepidation, all in from the beginning. And sure, there's failure. There's partnerships gone bad, great ideas that never come to fruition. But what I noticed in everybody is just the joy and stoke, as we use in California as a term, for life that came along with going for it. And I saw example after example after example of people who had gone for it and made it. They were mentors of mine, friends of mine. And I thought, if they can do it, knowing what's going on in their personal life and all the shit in the background, I can too. So yes, I've always been that person, head first, all in, stoked on it, and ready to go.
I love that. That's so cool. And I think for me, when I saw your resume come across, I was like, I can't let this guy go. I would rather sacrifice something else, or I'd figure out another way to make sure that you could be a part of it, just because I could tell from your email that you were going to be as into it as me. And I think for a business owner, you've probably seen this in the past too, having multiple businesses across multiple channels, is that it's very, very, very hard. And people who are listening to this, who have their own business or who have been in a position where they're working alongside an entrepreneur who's, getting something off the ground, it is so terribly hard to find someone who loves the business as much as you. And to have someone come on board that loves it just as much as me, maybe even more so than me, it's freaking wild. So I think it's we've been working together for the last 12 months, and I think there is some really exciting things that we've been talking about, the last couple of months in particular, that I think the community of Phyba and the podcast are going to absolutely adore and love, and they're going to be pretty stoked on it too. One thing I would like to lead into, what do you think is probably the biggest thing that you've dealt with, doing your holistic health and wellness education and coaching side of your business? What is the biggest thing that you've noticed between, I guess the general population is the biggest contributor to poor health? Do you think it's an educational thing? Do you think it's a motivational thing? Do you think it comes from childhood upbringing? Do you think it's you think people need to focus on supplements more? Do you think people need to focus on training more? Or is it a food-based uneducation style of, I guess, roadblock that's blocking people from, I guess, becoming healthier and happier and, probably attacking their goals like yourself?
Great question. And I would say my perspective is a bit alternative, but it's based in my own personal experience. And that is when we look at holistic lifestyle interventions, nobody is uneducated per se in this day and age of how to navigate health, improve health through nutrition, fitness, and mindset. The challenge and the roadblock that very few people talk about is the sustainability of any approach. And what I've experienced in the sustainability of any discipline, be it a training program, a nutritional approach, a supplement protocol, is our mental and emotional well-being. And when we approach a journey of health and wellness from a place of, I feel inadequate, I feel shame, I feel guilt, I feel fear around the symptoms I'm experiencing, so therefore I need to address the symptoms first, rather than the behaviors, the mindset, the value systems, the trauma, and the pain that informed the decisions I made to create the symptoms, we end up in a long, arduous, and exhausting cycle of applying principles that work that will never follow through on long term. So very few people in the space speak about our relationship to self. We may say, from a physical perspective, for example, I have right shoulder pain. Anytime I go to the CrossFit gym, any overhead movement hurts. I just can't follow through with this. Very few ask, what does the right shoulder represent to me? And why is that pain there in the first place? Am I constantly in a posture of depression and feeling down on myself because of issues of self-esteem? Is that creating thoracic carriage and forward head posture that limits my overhead movement? Nobody really asked that. Until I studied with Paul Chek, I didn't consider that either. But as you go into these deeper correlates of movement, why does my body move this way? Why do I squat this way? Why do I press this way? For example, you start to see that there's a much bigger, profound picture to look into that requires a lifetime of commitment to find resolution, not just a couple accessory exercises, scap pull-ups, what have you. And so I would say that's the number one roadblock that most people are unaware of, because it's scary to address. It brings up everything else, right? It's not just a dietary change or a movement change, and it takes a lifetime of work.
Yeah, wow. That's very profound. And I think I've noticed that within myself now that I'm training a lot less than what I used to. Back in the day, I would have been pulling sessions in the morning, sessions at nighttime, and pre and post those sessions, I was spending a lot of time making sure I took care and was thoughtful about the way that I moved, the way that I sat, the way that I walked, the way that I picked things up. There was always this sense of, how are you doing it and why are you doing it this way? Because again, being CrossFit, being my professional sport of choice, it was always about, how can I move this implement or my body from A to B the most efficient way possible? And since not spending time thinking about that and being that my first priority, from the moment I get out of bed to the moment I go back to bed, I started noticing I'd be sitting in the car a lot more, driving around to different places and talking about Phyba, and found myself sitting in the car and letting this drop down. And then, subtle points on my body, especially around my sternum, getting quite sensitive, to the point where, I might touch my sternum sitting in the car, and I'd almost get like a cold tooth sensation, but on my sternum area. I'm just like, why am I so tight and sore in this area? I haven't done any training. It's like, I felt like I just needed to open up more. But those types of things get put by the wayside when our priorities, sit within, how do I get my business to rock and roll? How do I make sure my mental health is in check? How do I make sure I'm being social enough? How do I make sure I'm giving enough to my partner and my kids and whatever it may be, and my pets? I think those things start to build up, and to the point where you just don't know how to rectify them. But I guess having someone like yourself to highlight those points, we need more people like you in the industry so we can start asking those questions. I think asking the right questions and getting quite specific with, where the problem may stem from is half the battle. And once you've got a real focal point on where that sits, you're halfway to solving that issue. You just need to know exactly what the issue is, rather than scattergun and hopefully something sticks on the wall and you figure out what it is just by trying everything. You start loading your cupboards up with a million different supplements and trying all the different foods and trying all the different training protocols, doing, kettlebell work and then CrossFit and then Pilates and Zumba and whatever else, high rocks training, and just hoping that it just fixes everything all in one go. But I think asking the right questions is probably a great starting point. You also mentioned one thing that I'm curious about. You got into golf biomechanics. Can you tell us more about this? You're a golfer?
Sure. I absolutely froth golf.
The question that everyone's going to want to know, what's your handicap?
Oh man, probably now if I were to get back on the course, I need some sticks here in Oz, but maybe an 8 or a 9, which is, okay. I'll take it. I'll take it. I always hit the ball really far, and I was more of like a John Daly than a Tiger Woods. When I was a kid. The first day of golf camp, you'll love this story. My best buddy growing up, Joe Ladd, is an incredible golfer. Just scratch golfer from like age 13 on, played in college, a beast. He took me to golf camp when I was about 12. And I remember I got out there. I had this really shitty little putter from this golf course. And I hit a putt and I missed it from 20 feet, which is normal. And I took this putter and I slammed it into the green, completely submerged. And everybody's like, dude, you can't do that. It's like, what are you talking about? This is the way I roll on the golf course. And that set a long journey of rectifying my golf behavior.
You sound like my brother.
Exactly, man. It can be the most aggravating game in the world. But yes, golf biomechanics came as a function of studying with the Czech Institute and getting really, really into golf when I was a kid. It was fascinating to learn how to assess an individual golfer using what the Czech Institute offers, which is goniometric assessment. So measuring joint angles, looking at movement patterns, which is quite specific to golf. It's a rotational sport, different from a lot of other sports, for example, basketball, which involves a little bit more sagittal plane movement. Everything in golf is primarily rotational, and looking at core function, looking at the oblique slings, for example, anterior and posterior, fascinating. And it just taught me a new method of working with golfers, which I did quite a bit, particularly when I worked in the States. And it also helped me improve my game tremendously when I was playing consistently. Knowing what changes in the swing were correlate to the body and how I could correct the body to make those swing changes possible. Chatting with golf professionals about that and working in conjunction with them. It was really cool. Really love it.
That's super fascinating. I think golf over especially the last 4 or 5 years has really taken a hold of not just, the semi-retired, but also, the young 18-year-olds, the teenagers, the early 20s through to the 30s. It's just been a bit of an uptick in people playing golf of all ages, which is great to see. Even got myself,
absolutely,
which is great.
We have a tea time coming up. I'm very stoked for it.
I am really pumped for it. I feel like I have to get out there and hit a few balls first. But
for sure.
That's super fascinating. One thing that really impressed me was your knowledge around supplementation, holistic health, and understanding all of the really cool TCM herbals that can potentially help someone overcome some type of pain or inflammation or feeling an abundance of stress. Do you have, and I've asked a lot of naturopaths, wellness consultants, dietitians, their favorite herbs. Have you got like a lineup of just 3 supplements that you would always recommend people take a look at? Basically straight off the bat, 3 things that you think are just, you can't go without.
Well, I think in a certain fashion, I'm obligated to say Super Brown's Floor Fuel. Perfect.
No, and they can be any. I'm going to ask you another question after this, and it's going to relate to the product suite and what you'd like to add to it. So you can say absolutely anything you like.
Love it. There are a few that have been really consistent for me. So kind of in the TCM range, adaptogen range, I really love ashwagandha. I've always responded really well to that as an adaptogen. And it's also a profound metaphor, the adaptogen, if you want to go deep into it, in terms of stress resilience and our ability to cope with the physiological effects of stress through the HPA axis. Ashwagandha can be really, really helpful as it relates to cortisol signaling and some other factors that come along with high stress. But an adaptogen, for those who don't know, if you're perhaps overexpressive or underexpressive of any metabolite, it can help to balance that and bring you to baseline, which is quite a Zen metaphor in a way. But I've taken that in a variety of forms, isolated by itself as well as in other products for a long time. And I find that when I take ashwagandha, and I know our good friend Lucas Aon is right on point with there being a threshold at which point you can take too much. But I think in apt quantities, it can really make a profound difference for one's ability to manage stress, personal and professional, throughout the day, throughout the weeks. And I've had a great experience of it thus far, particularly as I went through some periods of HPA axis dysregulation, if you want to go into that, which is just abnormal stress response.
Yeah.
So ashwagandha is a huge one for me. I also get tremendous benefit from essential amino acids during periods of fasting, and having that full spectrum in the body. So the difference between EAAs and BCAAs in terms of efficacy, Ben Greenfield is a great person to look into if you want to learn a little bit more about this. EAAs have a little bit more efficacy behind them in research. And when I'm fasting and I want a complete amino acid profile, but don't want to break the fast, I do take some amino acids. And they've just been helpful for energy, cognition, also satiety, fascinating enough. I don't know if there's strong research behind that, but I'm able to extend my periods of fasting longer when I take those. And I actually gave it to a family member recently who has a chronic history of under eating. And she said, as soon as I took those, I felt just alive, bright, focused, on. And I said, that's really interesting. When you look at protein and the regulation of protein and how it breaks down, obviously it turns into amino acids. And having a solid baseline of amino acid intake can be really helpful for performance, lean muscle mass. I'll say this again, no research behind this, just anecdotal evidence. I've never been more jacked in my life than when I fasted consistently and took amino acids a high quantity throughout the day. So love amino acids. The second one. It's tough because there are so many that I love for the third. But what I would say has made a profound difference for me, particularly at this time of year when in Adelaide it's not quite so sunny, is any sort of high quality omega-3 DHA EPA supplement. Not necessarily in the TCM range, but it makes a great difference to cognition, brain health, and having a solid composition of fatty acids in the body can be really, really helpful for hormone signaling, cell function. I can feel it immediately when I'm deficient and I take it. So last week we tried a plant-based one, algae-based, a supplement that was fantastic in that regard. Some people take cod liver oil, but I really, really find the benefit of EPA and DHA to be strong, and it has great correlation to longevity and health. So those would be my three.
Yeah, we did a really, really scientific, in-depth podcast with Mark from Vitality, who essentially grows phytoplankton in really, really pristine phytoplankton farms. And it's, a one-of-a-kind type of setup where they have 200 kilometers worth of glass cylinders growing phytoplankton, which essentially, if people are unaware, is the starting base of EPA, DHA, or omega-3s before the fish eat them. So the fish eat the phytoplankton, and then typically we source the EPA, DHA out of the fish, whereas we can now actually get the EPA, DHA in microscopic size. So essentially the uptake is much higher, the bioavailability is much higher, it can cross the blood-brain barrier better than the EPA, DHA that we're getting out of the fish. Therefore, we don't have to take as much of a dose. and it doesn't taste fishy. It tastes almost like a lemony peppermint style tincture, and it's in an oil base, and it's absolutely beautiful. And it's definitely something that I would recommend, especially for when people are asking me supplements to take. Just give me 5 things. You're just like, okay, protein, creatine, a multivitamin, omega, EPA, DHA, and then you may want to add something else in if you're lacking in iron or lacking in zinc or lacking in D3. Again, if you're in a place around the world, unlike the Gold Coast, where you're getting sun all year round in good quantities, especially like from early morning through to late afternoon, maybe even a D3 might help too. So, mate, I really appreciate that, and I think people could definitely take a leaf out of your book and maybe even check some of those supplements out. But now more to the point, which excites me. One of the biggest things that excites me within Phyba is creating new products. So product pipeline, which we currently have 5 products in the suite. Currently, we have creatine, we have Flora-Fuel, which is our gut tonic. We have Super Browns, which is our multivitamin adaptogen complex. We also have Yeet Perfect, which is our non-stim pre-workout. And then we also have a quad blend of protein, which is essentially our go-to protein that we basically say is pretty much on par with any whey protein in terms of amino acid profile. It's complete. It comes with a fermented aloe vera, which helps the gut microbiome diversity, helps with enzyme upregulation so we can digest and absorb and assimilate these nutrients. What would be your number one next product that you would love to see within the Phyba pipeline that we may or may not have spoken about already?
That is a great question. I immediately go to new flavors of protein because the ones we have queued are sick. I'm super stoked for that. But that's a continuation of products that we have. So when I think about new products and I think about supplements that I've taken historically that have been really, really helpful, there is a period of time when I was detoxifying my body from mold. And it turns out, if you want to go into it, that history of weight gain had a strong correlation to mold exposure, which I didn't know either. Until I got really deep into work with naturopaths, 2 from Mullumbimby, who are fantastic. Shout out to Narella Jacoby and Ann Kreiner, fantastic practitioners. But one of the things I took during that time, and God bless the taste of it. If you can master the taste of it, it's fantastic. If you don't, it's a godforsaken journey. And that is liposomal glutathione, a really powerful detoxifiant in the body, detoxificant. And something that I've also had IV infusions of previously when I was living in New Mexico, but it's the master antioxidant of the body. It's incredibly helpful for liver function, detoxification within and throughout. And I think a liposomal glutathione in any form, depending on how we formulate it and put it together, could be incredibly helpful for those that are looking at the therapeutic side of what we can offer at Phyba. It's been extremely helpful for me. I'm sure it would be for others.
Absolutely. And I think you're completely on point there. Anything liposomal from, a lot of the really good quality companies have been, they've been a part of my protocol for a very long time. Liposomal vitamin C, D. Just, I think if we can expand that range too, I think people are going to see huge benefit. And again, what we're all about is making sure that we can provide beautifully clean, holistic supplements are going to help people function in everyday life. And again, we are not advocating that you use these supplements as a fix of your diet, but also just a gap filler for your diet to just overcome the burdens that we come into contact with on a regular basis, day in, day out, which is much more profound than it was, say, 100 years ago. The amount of environmental toxins and chemicals and mold and other things that we come in contact with these days, just living this high, fast-paced, almost erratic lifestyle, it's just way more prevalent, and we're always looking for something quick and easy. And therefore, I think we run into, getting potentially cleaning products or using water that is maybe not the best thing that we could possibly do. So using supplements of high quality and high efficacy is something that we take pride in doing. And I think our product pipeline that we have sitting there waiting to get launched is going to be pretty epic, and I'm excited to do it. And now that you've said it, all I want to do is liposomal glutathione.
I love it. A couple other shout out, the electrolyte blend I think would be incredible as it relates to athletic performance. It would pop off. And I know that when I've taken electrolytes in the past, not only my immediate reaction to taking it is fantastic, athletic performance is so well improved. My ability to sustain in the gym is deeply impacted. So shout out to electrolytes as well.
Yeah, mate, 100%. And I guess my last question before we wrap this one up is, what has fired you up so far about Phyba, and what excites you about the future of Phyba? Like, what makes you just pumped to get out of bed to attack what we're doing and what we're trying to create here?
Before I go there, one last one: virility support. Really stoked on that.
Okay.
For
that one's going to be
it's mega for sure. What fires me up about Phyba? I could say absolutely everything about it, just because I'm so passionate and grateful for this opportunity. But in terms of what we are doing at Phyba that I believe stands out, and it was one of the first things that you spoke to me about when we mentioned the company, the vision, the mission, the values of what we're creating here. And that is that we are leading a holistic movement based in a heart-centered approach to nutrition, lifestyle, and fitness. It is not about, and this is ironic to say, just selling supplements. A lot of companies and people out there promote supplements, promote products for the sake of it. There's a consumer base, they'll put it out there, they buy it, cool. I genuinely believe that we care about the lifestyle, the person consuming the product, the formulation, the intent, the scientific rigor, and of course, the product disposition to one's unique needs. James and I are at no loss of ideas of how to help those who are genuinely seeking a holistic approach to performance in every way that we can, whether it's a conversation, an email, a product plug, a link to a podcast. It's way bigger than just supplements. And I think that comes through in our newsletters, for example, the podcasts. It's all about the lifestyle, creating health and wellness and vitality so that ultimately we can have more fun. I think that's what you and I share as the strongest bond. We want to have a good time.
Yeah,
this is exactly. A blast.
Yeah, and we want other people to have fun and to experience joy on a daily basis. And I think if we're not having fun and we're not having joy and we're not having, epic memories being made, what's the point? And I think what we can do through creating an environment and a community that allows us to have fun and have joy, they will also have fun and have joy and have energy and feel good and want to get outside and want to create memories that may or may not have come to fruition if they didn't, jump in the community. And even if they don't buy a supplement, but they learn something from, again, the email or the podcast, hey, job well done.
Absolutely. And look, we all want to just go surfing. We all want to live a lifestyle of being able to froth everything that we do. And if we don't have our health in tow, it just won't happen. It's the foundation of everything. Yeah,
I agree. Well, Xavi, I'm so thankful that you could jump on the potty. For those of you who want to learn more about Xavi, go follow him over on his Instagram. He's got a great Instagram with tons of knowledge. This podcast is going to be up on YouTube. We'll also pop it up on StreamYard. It'll also get dispersed out through Apple Podcasts and Spotify. So share it around if you saw some value in this podcast, and also send us a message if you think some of these supplements that you'd like to see in the product pipeline come to fruition. We really want to hear what you guys want as a consumer base, and we want to give you guys the absolute best products we can. So thanks so much, Xavi. You've been an absolute pleasure, and I'm looking forward to seeing you again soon.
Thank you, legend. A pleasure as always.
Thanks, brother.